Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on consumer consulting boards. What will we do this afternoon? Well, we have two presentations prepared for you. One about what is a consumer consulting board, how does it work, how can you integrate it into your business? And secondly, a case study on what we did over the last 4 years in terms of structural collaboration, market research, online communities, and consumer consulting boards at Heinz in the Netherlands. But let's start with a presentation on, let's say, the ins and outs of market research online communities, consumer consulting boards, and how they have the power to possibly reshape your business. Let's take a look back on the last 5 years. If we look at the last 5 years, I think every one of you will agree with me that it was quite a crazy time because a lot of change has happened both in the consumer world and in the business world. Let's first take a look at what has happened in the consumer world. I think that through social media, nowadays consumers really have gained the power to make or break brands. If you like it or not, people will talk about you, your company, and your products. And you can do nothing about this. What we have to take away from this trend is that as a marketing person, you don't have full control anymore about what's being said about you. But it's not only that people talk about your products, your brands, and your company, they also want to talk with the people behind those brands and those companies. From our social media around the world study, we learned that 80% of consumers nowadays wants to have a say in the future of the brands and the product categories they like, they have an affinity with. So we have to deal today with really empowered consumers. They talk about brands and products and they want to talk with brands and products. If we look at the business world, we see that we deal with a situation that is harder than ever before. There is the economic climate that is totally different than a couple of years ago. It's tougher for everyone. But despite this tough economical situations, consumers really expect more from us every single day, and competitive landscapes are really moving very fast and very quick. In such an environment of harder, better, faster, I think we need to make ourselves stronger as companies every single day. So a lot of change has happened both in the consumer world and in the business world. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to adapt as companies to this new kind of situation we all operate in? Well, our research and our experience with clients shows us that two things are important in this new world. It's becoming open and agile as a company. What do we mean with open? Well, with open we just mean embrace the empowered consumer. Work together with him. Listen to them. Co-create, collaborate with them. What do we mean with agile? Well, it's gaining that capability to react very fast, very quickly on all those changes that happen both in the consumer and in the business world. Being open and agile, well, that is something that is today quite scary for a lot of companies. Why? Because most companies are not 100% ready for this. Let's do a quick reality check. Are companies today embracing the empowered consumer? Are they having a two-way dialogue with the consumer world? No, I don't think so. Most companies still, both in marketing and in market research, have a one-way dialogue with the consumer. They just send messages, they just ask questions. They not do or perform active listening, they don't work together with consumers. Secondly, if we look at companies and becoming agile, we see that there is an issue with the way organizations are just structured today, which holds them down from really being agile. Two things that we see here. First of all, a lot of companies work in projects. They have marketing campaigns, they perform ad hoc market research projects, and they move from one campaign to the other, they move from one ad hoc research project to another one. What's the big problem here? Well, that by definition, you miss out on all the marketing and listening, learning opportunities that lie in between two marketing campaigns or in between two ad hoc projects. What we need to do is constantly listen and work together with the consumer world in order to grasp all the opportunities that are lying out there. Second issue that we have is that most companies are organized in silos, in different departments. And actually what we do when we create, for example, a new product is we develop it in an R&D lab, and then it goes into a department who defines the positioning, then it goes to a department who will arrange the launch, then it goes to a department who will make sure it is all well set in the shops, and we are losing a lot of time along the way. Why? Because we are not working together as different departments on the same project at the same time. No, we are just throwing the project over the wall towards the next department, making that from creation of a product until it's in the shop, in most companies, it at least takes 2 years. So becoming open and agile, that's what we need to do. That's how we need to adapt to this new environment, but it will not be easy. But we need to start today with gaining those two capabilities, because it's probably the biggest opportunity ever to outperform the competition. Because no company out there has yet both capabilities. So if you are one or among the first to gain these capabilities, you will probably outperform your competitors. So what are we going to do to become open and agile? Are we going to call Bain, McKinsey, and all those other fancy but very expensive consultants to help us and to restructure our organization? No, I don't think that's what we need to do. We need to bring consumers into our business. They are going to help us to reach these two goals. Why? Because they are probably the best consultants there are for hire. And I will give you 3 reasons why at Insights Consulting we really believe that consumers can be great consultants to businesses. The first example is rather personal. It's the cookie that you see on the screen, that's my favorite cookie. And I'm already a fan of the cookie since I was a kid of 3 years old. Meaning that I probably survived at least 10 generations of brand managers of the cookie. Because brand managers have that habit to change jobs every 2 to 3 years. So who knows most about this cookie, what it stands for, what the history of the brand is? I think I do, together with my fellow fans, my fellow consumers of that cookie. And it's not only that consumers, loyal customers have a lot of knowledge about certain brands and about certain product categories, they are also extremely engaged to make sure that the companies they have affinity with within the product categories they like really will perform well. And an example that pops up into my mind is one from a community we did 2 years ago for Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream brand. We did a community with extreme brand fans. So people who score a 9 on a 10 on a scale of brand fanship. So we are literally here talking about those people who are wearing Ben & Jerry's t-shirts. We thought, together with the marketing team, all those people will really applaud us for every single thing we do. But nothing less was true. They were really very critical towards everything that the marketing guys were doing. They even became angry at the marketing team when they did something wrong with what they call their brand. So that means that consumers, people who have affinity with your brand, people who have affinity with the product category you're in, have a lot of knowledge about it and are also very engaged to make sure you will perform well, you will perform better. And last but not least, they are always right. They are probably the only consultants who are always right because they are the ones that just buy your products. So 3 reasons why consumers are probably the best consultants you can hire as a company. So what are we going to do? We are going to bring them into the company, and that will make that we become an open company, that we embrace the consumer world. How are we going to do that? What's the most efficient way of bringing consumers into your company? It's by setting up a market research online community, or how we like to call them, a consumer consulting board. What's the most simplest definition of a consumer consulting board? Well, it's bringing together a larger group of people for a longer period of time on a closed online platform. One sentence, but in that one sentence we have all ingredients to define what it is and to compare it with traditional forms of listening to consumers like focus groups. Let's do that little exercise. What's the same? Well, it's closed, meaning that we still determine who will be on the board and we still make sure that your secrets are saved. It's an invitation-only platform. What's different? Well, it's online, giving you all the convenience of online research and giving you all the advantages in terms of anonymity and people who will speak more openly and more freely. But the most beautiful things about a market research online community or consumer consulting board is that you work with more people over a longer period of time. More people means that you have more and different profiles of people, which leads to a richness of different opinions and rich clashes of ideas. And secondly, more time with those people makes that you can really think and rethink things with them over time. You can really co-create from an initial insight, an initial idea, over the concept for a new product or ideas for a new marketing campaign until the final execution. And along the way, every time you need research, every time you need consumer input, well, then you will just have it at your fingertips, which is really great, which is really beautiful. And I think that those two elements, more people over a longer period of time, that's what makes a community a really beautiful and disruptive research methodology. So having a consumer consulting board will make that you are open or become more open. Using it in a structural way will make that you become an agile company as well. What do I mean with using it in a structural way? Well, it's giving it the position within your company that it deserves. Really using it as a board of advisors, a group of consumers that you listen to almost every single day for almost every business or marketing decision you need to make across the different departments within the company. And by not just having it, but giving it the right position within your company, you will make that it's not just a new market research tool, but it really becomes a board of advisors to the business. You really use it in a structural way, you really get the most out of it. Sébastien will later on share a case study with you on how we, in 4 years' time, moved from co-creation to real structural collaboration at Heinz in the Netherlands. Great case that shows you that you can work with consumers for most business questions almost every single day across different departments. I will talk a little bit about a project we did last year for Heineken, in which we co-created the Club of Tomorrow with youngsters from all around the world, young clubbers from all around the world. And what do we do? Well, first we listen to them. What are their needs? How do they go out today? We turned the insights into ideas, the ideas into concepts, and finally the concepts ended up in a real club that was built in Milan during the design fair over there. What makes this structural collaboration? Well, the fact that over 1 year long, every time we were in need for consumer feedback and input, we had it. We went back to the community to fine-tune ideas, to fine-tune concepts, to fine-tune the final plan of the club. And it was not only the market research department who was involved in this project, also marketing, design, PR, communications, all those different departments at Heineken that were working on this project were involved from the start and were working together around the community. Okay, this is most of the time the moment in my presentation that people look at me and think like, well, Tom, this all sounds very interesting. It sounds very good. Maybe it sounds a little bit too good to be true. Having a consumer on your left and right shoulder that you can ask questions to when you need it, and that whisper in your ear when something relevant happens in the world. But what about the cost? What about making this happen? Is this possible in most companies? Well, yes, it is. But it will not come overnight. You have to make it an evolution rather than a revolution. That's why my advice to most companies is think big. have that end goal of structural collaboration in mind, like they already do it at Heinz. But start small. Start with a pilot project. Start with a community of 50 people, 3 weeks, and feel how it is. Feel how it is to have such a community for one brand or one objective. Make it a success, and then move on. Move on towards structural collaboration. And that's also what Heinz does. They use communities for short-term projects, 50 people, 3 weeks time. But they also have large communities where they involve large parts of their business in one country on a daily basis with consumers. So they started with pilot projects, and then they make pilot projects bigger, and they let them evolve towards something they use almost every single day across different parts of the business. And you start with something small, and then you can move towards a bigger project by reusing your community when you need it. And that's exactly what IKEA does. They started a community 3 weeks, 50 people in 5 different countries to evaluate their 2013 catalog and to have input for the 2014 one. And along the way now, after those 3 weeks, the community went asleep. But along the way now, when they need consumer input in different phases of the creation process, we just reopen the community for 1 week. Like what we did a couple of weeks ago was thinking about the cover page and the overall theme together with consumers for the 2014 catalog. So you start small, think big, and a step up is like reopening, reactivating your community when you need it. It's moving step by step from co-creation to structural collaboration. One of the misconceptions about market research online communities, consumer consulting boards, is that it's a co-creation, crowdsourcing, innovation kind of tool, and that it's for companies who have a lot of innovation needs. Well, it's that, but it's much more than that. Actually, you can use a consumer consulting board or research community for every objective that you have that you normally would answer with qualitative research. Like we dived under the skin of young moms for Danone in the UK to generate insights about how it is to have a young kid and what kind of issues you have when feeding your young child. For KLM, indeed we did ideation, co-creation of new concepts, new services among frequent flyers. For a couple of advertising agencies, we do co-creation sessions on new campaigns. For brands, we develop and craft brand strategies, like for Ben & Jerry's, for the brand. But we also do some pre-launch check for a couple of FMCG companies and service companies like Vodafone, where all over Europe we test new applications right before they will be launched in the market. We test the product, we test the positioning, and we test the advertising campaign that will go with the launch. So really 360-degree check right before the launch. And of course, it's also about optimizing existing products, existing services, or websites, like we do for eBay, amongst others in the Netherlands, for Marktplaats. So you really see every objective that you can have, that you normally would solve with qualitative research, can be done in a market research online community or consumer consulting board. I hope that this first part of the presentation has really shown you what it is. What is a market research online community? And how is it different from other forms of a couple of basic questions. Who are we going to work with? How many people are we going to work with? How are we going to create engagement? How are we going to keep them engaged over time? And how are we going to get the maximum out of the community? All the answers that I will give are just based on research that we have done at Insights Consulting over the last 7 years. First question, who do we work with? Or maybe better, who can we work with in such a community? Well, our research has shown that the high performers in a community, the ones who bring in the best ideas, bring in the most insights, are very active, are always people who show brand or topic identification. What do we mean with that? It are people who have more affinity with the brand that we are talking about than just the average person. It are people who have more affinity with the topic we are dealing with than just the average person. So, by definition, we have to say that the community is not representative. Is that a bad thing? No, I don't think so, because it's qualitative research. And actually what we are doing here is we work with people who are interested in what we are going to do. They will be willing to work with us over a longer period of time, and they are interesting to listen to. They are the ones who have something interesting to tell to you. One of the exercises I do quite a lot is ask people to think back of their latest focus group and to tell me how many of those people were really interesting to listen to, who were really inspiring and have really pushed their thinking forward. Most people answer, if half of them do that, it's already a great success. So actually in a community, we work with the people who are interested and interesting, and especially the last thing I think is quite important. How many people do we work with? Or how many people do we need in order to know everything there is to know? Well, we have found that on a given question, you need 30 answers to reach the saturation point, like you find in every piece of qualitative research. That means that after the 30th answer, we just hear more of the same things. So the question is, how many people do we need to reach 30 answers? Well, it depends on the time period. In a short community where people participate very intensively, very frequently, we only need 50 people to reach the 30 answers. In a long-term community where people participate more in waves, they have active and less active periods, we need to compensate for that wave effect, and we need, if you go beyond 3 months, at least 150 people to have at least 30 answers on every given question. And we are a fan of not going beyond the 150 number in a community, in a subgroup of a community. Why? Because we see that if you go beyond 150 people, all of a sudden it becomes very difficult for the moderator to interact with the people, to ask great probing questions, and it becomes very difficult for the people in the community to have a good discussion with one another. And those two things are really, truly important when you do qualitative research. So we work with between 50 and 150 people who are interested and interesting in a consumer consulting board. And then it's important to create engagement. What we do in order to really have engaged participants is we give them a briefing right before they go and log on onto the platform. In a chat session of 30 minutes, we explain them who we are, what we are going to do in the community, and what they will get back from us. What they will get back from us is a small monetary incentive, is a lot of feedback. Every week they receive feedback from us and from the client, what has happened with your input, and from time to time they receive a small gift. That kickoff session is really important to make that the people are engaged from the start. We see that immediately after that session, they are truly excited about what's going on, what will happen on the platform, and they immediately start working on the community. So then we have participants that are intrinsically already motivated. We have engaged them. We have created some excitement. And then, of course, the goal is to keep that excitement, to keep them engaged over a longer period of time. In order to do that, we need to make sure that our topic guide, our conversation guide, what we are going to do with them is really a story, is really a nice adventure and a nice experience to be on, and that there is a lot of variation in the things that we are going to do with them, meaning a lot of different tasks, a lot of different kind of questions asked in different kinds of ways. So that it really is fun to participate in the community. Another thing that we do in our communities is gamifying them. That means that we use some of the principles and psychology behind games to make our research community more fun, more entertaining for the people to participate. Things that we do is we give people badges for special achievements that they have made. If you contributed well, you get a badge from us, giving you some kind of status. We turn some questions into challenges. It's more fun to take part in a challenge than to answer a question. Other things that we do is we organize battles of arguments in the community, and we set milestones in the community, and if people reach a certain milestone, they unlock a special gift, a special prize. So we build in, let's say, those special moments, that we build in a certain tension to make it more fun, engaging, inspiring to take part in the research community. But of course, research communities and qualitative research in general is not only about talking to the right people, having great discussions with the right people. It's also about letting people think different, more emotionally, more creative, into a different context. And of course, in order to do that, we have projective techniques in qualitative research, and we have translated a lot of those old, traditional, qualitative projective techniques to the online world. But of course, in the online environment, you have a whole lot of different and other possibilities as well. And I will share now a small case study with you that really shows that in a community, by having more people over a longer period of time and that richness of online tools, you can do fascinating things. And it's a study we have done a while ago with Chiquita. What was the objective? Well, Chiquita wanted to launch their new smoothie offering into the European market, and they were looking for physical and mental benefits of eating and drinking in this case, because it's juices, fruit, to use all those physical and mental benefits in the advertising campaign that was supporting the launch of their smoothie offering. So we did a community, 3 weeks, 50 people, 25 of them were living the healthy lifestyle and already eating a lot of fruit, 25 others were living the unhealthy lifestyle and almost eating no fruit at all. We started in the first week with just a discussion. What's a healthy lifestyle? What's the role of eating fruit in a healthy lifestyle? More or less a topic guide that you would also have in a focus group about this theme. But it became more interesting in the second week. In the second week, we said to those 2 different groups, let's do a scientific experiment. Let's swap lives. So the ones that are already eating a lot of fruit, stop eating fruit. The ones that are eating no fruit at all, well, 3 times this week, we will send a guy at your doorstep with a basket full of fruit. Eat as much as possible. So during that week, people will actually changing their behavior, and we ask them to report on how they felt about that in an online diary, and every day we were sending them questionnaires about their physical and mental energy level. So week 1 and week 2 were giving us rich input on what happens with people if they change their behavior? What's the role of fruit in a healthy lifestyle? What does a healthy lifestyle mean to people? Giving us a whole list after first analysis of mental and physical benefits. What did we do in the third week? Well, we gave those arguments, those mental and physical benefits to the people, and we said, convince one another to change your behavior, to change your lifestyle, and use arguments from those physical and mental benefits that we have found in week 1 and week 2. So actually what happens is, through a natural discussion, a natural conversation, the mental and physical benefits that we have found are prioritized. And the advertising agency immediately knows which arguments will work best in their advertising campaign. Great example, I think, of what kind of new things you can do with communities that were just not possible in traditional focus groups. Thinking harder, thinking different, anywhere, anytime. We give our community members access to the platform through their mobile phones, because if they can do that, they can send us a lot of pictures, a lot of movies, giving us also insights into their living environment. Very personal and contextual information is what we get. What you see on the screen is an example from a project that we have done in Australia with Campbell's, where we could literally see how people were shopping, how they were stocking their food, how they were preparing their food, and what kind of dishes they were eating in which kind of context. So we could literally follow their lives over 3 weeks of time by allowing them to also contribute to the community via their mobile phones. So if we have done this, we have a great community, right number of people, right profile of the people, we have letting them think hard, different, anywhere, anytime, we get a rich pile of very interesting data and information. Now the question is, how are we going to get the most out of it? Of course, through traditional, great qualitative analysis. That's the first thing. But the second thought we had a while ago was, we say to brands, you have to work together with your consumers. Why would we then, as market researchers, not work together with our participants to do a better job? And that's what we did. We now involve participants in moderation, analysis, and reporting. We'll give 3 short examples of each of them. If you want to know more, we have written great papers about this topic. Co-moderation. What happens? Well, on a certain topic, next to the professional moderator, we have a participant who helps us with the moderation. What do we see? Well, the co-moderator, the co-pilot in this case, asks different follow-up questions than the original moderator, which leads to different answers from the people, which leads to 25% new information that otherwise we wouldn't have found. Actually, what the co-moderator does is filling the blind spots of the researcher. And that's what happens in those 3 examples that I'm sharing right now. Participants are helping us out to do a better job as a moderator, because as a moderator, as a researcher, you can be very well trained, but you work for a whole range of different target groups, and you cannot just understand all those different target groups as well. You are just not living all those different lives. So you need participants to help you to close the gaps. Exactly the same thing happened in this example project that we did for MTV Networks, 100 youngsters from 10 different cities to understand their lives. What I'm always saying is I can be a great researcher, can be very well trained, but I'm not a 16-year-old girl living in New York City. So I cannot understand everything of lives of 16-year-old girls living in New York City. So what did we do in this project? Every time we had something from that target audience that we didn't understand fully, we put it aside. And afterwards we invited 10 participants that volunteered for it to help us with the analysis in some kind of analysis game. What does it bring to the table? Again, 20 to 40% additional insights are brought to the table by the participants. Things that we as researchers didn't see, were not aware of. Again, participants filling our blind spots. Last example is how we ask participants to help us with adjusting the conclusions to make it the best possible final conclusions. Example that you see on the screen is one from Philips, a project that we did in China. We know in China it was a medical topic, and in China there is a lot of social desirable answering, so we involved participants to help us out with getting behind the truth, with adjusting our conclusions. We had a community of 50 people. Next to the 50 that were taking part in the community, we had 10 of exactly the same profile that were just observing the community, and that afterwards were helping us out to get the best possible conclusions, to adjust our conclusions. And because they were not taking part in the community, but helping us to get behind the truth, they were freed from their social desirable answering, and they adjusted 14% of our conclusions. 14%, that was really very important in order to be spot on with the launch of the new product. So we now know what is a community and how to run it in the best possible way. Final bit of this presentation is on how to implement it within the business. We already saw structural collaboration will not come overnight. Start with a pilot project. Start small with a project of 50 people, 3 weeks. Second thing is, if you do it, have objectives, measure if you reach your objectives, and if that's the case, celebrate your success. Because if your pilot project is successful, you will get a buy-in to move from co-creation towards structural collaboration. One of the most important things in doing a successful pilot project is great internal and external communication. First of all, internal communication. Why is it so important? Well, you can have the best possible community, but if nothing happens with the research results, why would you have done it anyway? So at Insights, we have a 3-step procedure to communicate research results. Engage, inspire, activate. Engage is about making people curious before the final debrief about what's going to happen. What do we do here? We hang up quotes within the company. We play small quizzes about research results with the people that will be in the final debrief before the final debrief. Inspire is about organizing a workshop in which you share the insights but also start working with the insights. But sometimes your audience is just too big, like in the case of Unilever R&D. We had 500 people to work with. Impossible to do a workshop. What did we do? Well, we were creative and we created a consumer news website on which insights were shared every single day during the whole community project. Or sometimes your audience is just too creative and you know that by just presenting, you will not reach them. It will not land. That was the case in the Heineken Club of the Future project, where we were reporting to creatives. What did we do with those designers? Well, we just turn the insights into an interactive infographic. So engage is about making them curious up front. Inspire is about sharing the insights in the best possible way. And sometimes you need to be creative. And then finally, activate is about making sure the research results have some kind of afterlife, are used afterwards. One of the things we did in that project for MTV, where it was about the lives of youngsters today, and we needed to report back to senior executives who are at least twice as old as their target group, well, we turned all the hotspots that we found in those communities, all the cool places where youngsters in those 10 different cities that we were talking about hang out, into city guides. And we have given that to the senior executives and told them, next time you are in New York, for example, don't go to the new fancy restaurant, but go to one of the places that was discussed in the community. Live the research results. See the research results with your own eyes. What happens if you communicate research results in 3 steps? Before, during, and after the final presentation, research is used more. Why? Because people are confronted more with the results and with the consumer world. Then, external communication, probably one of the missed opportunities with communities. What can you talk about? Well, about the process, the fact that you have a community, about the outcome, the products that are created by the community, and about the learnings. One of what the learnings were from the community. Chiquita, for example, they really used those mental and physical benefits that we gained from the community literally on the website, the mini website that was used to launch the smoothie offering. Why is that important next to internal communication to also externally communicate about your community? Well, actually, if you have a community, if you have a consumer consulting board, you listen, you're open as a company, something that people expect nowadays from brands. So if you do it, why not communicating about it? So what happens if you have a community, if you run it well, from a participant perspective, and if you communicate about it well internally and externally, and if you take steps to move from co-creation to structural collaboration, what kind of impact does that have on your business? Well, it has impact on 3 different levels. First of all, our research shows that if you have a community and you use constantly inputs from consumers to make better advertisements, to make and create better services and products, those products and services score better in concept tests, are more successful onto the market. We have papers about that. If you want to have more information about it, feel free to mail us afterwards. What happens with your brand? Well, if you communicate also about it towards the external world, we see that your brand is seen as more open, more contemporary, more green. So you humanize your brand. And thirdly, it's not only that you have more consumer relevant products, services, and advertising campaigns, it's not only that you humanize your brand, you become also an agile company by structurally collaborating with consumers. Why? You have consumer input at your fingertips. If there is a burning issue within the company or outside the company, you can ask consumers what to do or how to react in just a matter of hours. And secondly, we also see that walls between different departments are brought down. All of a sudden, companies or within companies, different departments start working around the community on the same project. So, what have we learned today? We have learned what a community is, that you need to become open and agile, that consumer consulting boards and performing or using it in a structural way, moving from co-creation towards structural collaboration, will help you to reach your goal of becoming an open and agile company, but it will not come overnight. You have to start small, but think big. It's an evolution, not a revolution. And the end goal should always be using your community in the end, almost every single day, across different departments for almost all the business issues you are encountered with. And it's exactly that Sébastien will share with you in a couple of moments. And once we have reached the goal of structural collaboration within a company, it's time, I think, within companies for a chief consumer officer. Somebody who can represent the consumer consulting board, the community, the voice of the customer at the highest level within the company. And I think the time to make a start with it is now, not only because it's a great opportunity to tomorrow outperform your competition, but everything is in place to do it. The technology is here, social technology is ready for it. People are almost waiting for companies to start doing this. And finally, I hope that I shared a little bit of the recipe, how to make a start with it, both at the consumer side and at the side of the business. And Sébastien, can you inspire us now with a very concrete case?
Okay, my sound should be working right now. Sorry for that. So yes, I will be discussing the Heinz case. I think this is a really good showcase to show how communities evolve within companies and how they can be used to tackle different objectives within companies. But before diving completely directly into the case, I just want to give a bit of explanation behind the Heinz brand because the case is specifically about Heinz Netherlands. And why do I say Heinz Netherlands? Well, even though Heinz is a global company, everybody knows Heinz, we mainly know them from their tomato ketchup. However, per country, they have a lot of different local brands as well. So the Heinz community that we'll be talking about, there they not only talk about the tomato ketchup, but they involve really different brands. That also means that we have a lot of stakeholders. So we have a lot of different people within Heinz, different brand managers who are involved with this project. So that a bit as a background to Heinz. So I will continue a bit with the background in the first bit of the case. Then I will talk about the benefits that the people from Heinz experienced by using the community. And finally, we will also talk a bit more about how to make a community a success, both internally within the company, but also externally with participants. How can we really engage with them to basically get the most out of them? All right. So a bit of background, the situation for Heinz. So we're talking about already quite a while ago, and Heinz, the huge company that they are, they had loads and loads of consumer data coming in, both qualitative, quantitative. But as you probably all know, those were all different research projects, all different companies, research companies who did the research. So everything was quite a bit everywhere, and it was not very easy for marketeers if they wanted to just get to know the consumer, know what the consumer was thinking, because it was just everywhere basically. And in addition, what they did is they have different points in time where they did their research, but there wasn't this continuous feeling. It was rather abstract because every report was different from the other. So all in all, they did want to have a good consumer feeling. They want the consumer to be at the heart of their decisions, but they were feeling that it was actually at that point in time quite difficult for them. They were feeling a bit restricted to get that consumer feeling. So they set themselves the goal to really go out there, change the ways that they do research, and really try and make that consumer, on the one hand, less abstract, but a lot more real. So not just somewhere hidden in a report and also over different reports, but really bring that consumer to life. And also just bring the marketeers closer to the community. So not somewhere in the street, but really bring the marketeer and the consumer almost in the same room, enabling the marketeer, the researcher, the R&D person, basically everybody within the company, giving them the ability to observe and even interact with their consumer that they're working for. So Heinz set out and they said, we have two objectives here. On the one hand, we want to break down the wall that, these different books and these different reports that they have. We don't want the hassle anymore of having to look for all the different reports and, oh yeah, in which report can I find that information again? None of that anymore. I want to have a clear report where they can basically find what they need, and they also want a tool that is very fast and that they can immediately use in case they have a question. Of course, they had a look around what was being offered, and they came to the conclusion that they needed a community. And here you can see that community. It's called the Food Enzo community, which runs in Holland with a lot of passionate foodies in the Netherlands. So if we take a look at the composition of this community, we can very briefly discuss the 4 points, the 4 ingredients that Tom also already touched upon. So in terms of numbers, since we're looking at an ongoing community, in this case for Heinz, we needed a higher number than 50. So we went for the number about 200 participants to compensate for that wave effect. In terms of profile, we were looking for people who are really into food, who are into cooking, they have more interest than the average person in this topic, and also people who are decision makers, the people who shop for these products within this category. In terms of objectives, Heinz was very clear. They wanted their marketeers to really get in touch with their consumers, have a much better feeling of what the consumer is like, being able to ask immediate questions, direct questions, not having to wait for it, and just really getting up close with the consumer, basically. And finally, of course, duration. This is an ongoing community, so no real time frame there. Now, here, and I love this slide. Here you can see basically the evolution of the community. At Heinz, they have now had the community for 5 years. And as you can see, they started in 2008. And well, yeah, to say it as nicely as possible, it was very abstract and clean. And you can see that the community has come quite a long way. And I think that the major changes that we have seen from Heinz perspective is that the way that they use the community has changed. They use it for a lot more questions than they used to. Originally, they started with very ad hoc questions that were mainly about fine-tuning certain campaigns, whereas now they will actually use it for the whole spectrum of business objectives. They will look for inspiration. They will ask for people to use it in ideation tools, for example, new products, packaging development, all sorts of business objectives, basically. And also the investment from Heinz's side. They have now more marketeers who are involved with the platform, but not just marketeers. They actually try to involve other departments within the company as well, trying to get R&D on there as well, so they can get aspired as well. So actually, I think not only the platform has evolved in terms of look and feel, but also Heinz has evolved and the role that the community plays within Heinz. So, of course, after 5 years, it was time for a decent evaluation. So we went to Heinz and we asked them, what were for you the main benefits of having this community? And yeah, the number one answer that they gave was flexibility. They have it ongoing, so it's there every day of the year, and any day of the year that a marketeer has a brilliant idea or has a question that he needs to know how consumers think about certain things, how they do certain things. They can just go to the community, ask their question, and within days they have the answer that they need. So it's a direct line with the consumer. They don't have to wait weeks for a recruitment, then a complete research project, a report. No, they can just ask it straight away. A second benefit that they mentioned was the quality of the data. So obviously, since this is an ongoing community, we have people who have been there for quite a while, and all the participants actually get to know each other, and you could almost say that they are really friends. They're connecting on an almost daily basis. They really get to know each other better through the different topics, which means that they really open up to each other. They really tell personal stories. You almost get to follow them on a daily basis, so you really get to know them as well, really getting a very good feeling of what consumers are like, how they use your products, how they think about your products, and of course, not just your products, but the whole category in general, basically. It gives you a feeling also of how to talk to consumers by seeing, by observing basically what is relevant for them on a day-to-day basis. You know which buttons to push if you really want to trigger their attention and get their attention. And finally, a last benefit that they mentioned is that for them it's become so easy and almost normal to just go to the community and immediately observe what consumers are doing. This immediate connection, this almost kind of window into the consumer world, they say has been very valuable for them. It brought them out of their ivory tower and into the world of the consumer, basically. So all in all, Heinz is very, very happy, and they have quite a success story with their community. Now, of course, creating a success, that just doesn't happen overnight, and there are a few things that we do to create this success. And it's actually kind of comparable to stay within the theme of food to a great restaurant. You kind of have to keep your guests surprised every time they come back. You got to offer them something new, something fresh, and you have to evolve together with your customers. Now, if we look at how can we create success on the external side, which would be then the side of the participants, how can we create a very engaging experience so that we get actually better data, more data in the end. We do this in 4 different ways. On the one hand, people who are on our communities are often also people who are actually huge brand fans. They absolutely love the brand, and therefore they also want to have an impact on the brand. Like Tom mentioned before in the Ben & Jerry's example, you can't just do anything with your brand. They actually want to have a say in it, and you can't just touch their brand and change it however you like. So they want to have an impact on the brand, and how we created that impact from their side is basically we created the Wall of Fame. So as I mentioned, there was some campaign testing as well. And what Heinz did is, well, they asked some questions about this. And once they launched the campaign, they also put this up on the community in the Wall of Fame and said, you know, this campaign, we talked about this a while ago. Well, here is the result. This is what we decided. And this is actually based on what you guys told us. So immediately showing the impact to the consumers, obviously a very strong trigger for them to stay involved and stay motivated. Another trick between brackets that we use is exclusivity. For certain challenges, we will go to a subset of people, a small subsample, and ask them, you know, we have a special assignment for you. You know, we've seen that you're very engaged with this topic. This is something you really like. We've also seen that you're very good at explaining this or that. Could you, for example, tell us how you make chicken, what's a typical chicken dish for you, etc., etc. And then, of course, these people, they feel personally addressed. They kind of feel special, which for them is another reason to give it their extra best and to go that extra mile. Thirdly, we also try to make it fun. This is, of course, obviously making it more fun for the participants, but to be very honest, this also makes it more fun for me as well. So instead of paying for their attention, as you can see on the side, we try to play for their attention. So obviously there will be an incentive provided to the participants, but we also try to play for their attention by using gamification, like Tom mentioned. And what we do for the Heinz community, for example, is we often give goodie bags away when they answer a topic about a certain brand, a certain topic. Then a week later, we will send them a goodie bag. This could be a basket with tomato ketchup, but it could also be a basket with chocolate sprinkles, whatever, but kind of like immediately giving them the product that they're working with. Also works really well to help them. As you can see, we also make use of quizzes. Competitions, of course, always work well as well. And then we come to the last one, which is connecting. And this also kind of ties back into the whole thing, as in they think it's their brand and they want to connect with their brand. So when you introduce the people who work on their brand and work behind the scenes, they're very excited to meet these people, because these are the people that take care of their beloved brand, which is why we frequently introduce people, the brand managers, the people from R&D to the community and have them interact, basically, not on a day-to-day basis, but more through blog posts where we introduce this person, have them ask some questions, have the community feedback to these questions, ask them questions as well. A very brief introduction, but putting a face on the brand, basically. So that covered the external bit, the participant bit, on how to engage with them to create the success that we want to have with a community. But of course, let's be honest, we also want internal success, of course. So there are a couple of ways how we like to do that. And one very fun way that we do this is we create a game. And in this game, we ask some questions based on data that we collected on the community. And this game really tests everybody who's within the company, their knowledge about the consumer. And of course, everybody gets a result at the end. Also, every time you answer a question, you get immediate feedback, so you immediately know whether you got it right or wrong. It's something that really triggers you and that shows you how much you really know about the consumer, because sometimes we think we know, but we're not always that right. And it's also fun because it kind of triggers that internal competitive spirit a bit, as in who knows the consumer the best. So this is a very good way to engage everybody internally, to see how much they know about the participants, about the consumer, and get them to go to the community, use the data in their day-to-day business. Secondly, the community is, of course, something that is online. But we noticed that actually using offline triggers works very well as well. So what we do here is we will collect, for example, some very striking quotes from consumers, or we will collect some pictures, maybe some videos. We will advertise the results from the game, who was the big winner from this game, so who knows the consumer the best. And just hanging this in places that are high traffic zones, such as the coffee corner at the office, or in the bathroom, where people can basically hardly miss it. Really trying to involve people and engage them on the work floor as well, to start talking about the consumer. And finally, we of course also organize workshops where we use different techniques, also some gamified techniques, to really bring the consumer again back to life and have the managers really think and reflect upon what the consumer does and says. And what we then actually see is, after these workshops, we've answered a couple of questions, but also obviously new questions have come up, and actually creating that perfect circle of questions that we can then again feed back into the community, going for more in-depth and more richer answers. What we can also do, of course, is really make you live the community. How do we do that? What we do is, for example, for Heinz, what we did is we collected some recipes that people create with their products. And basically what we did then is make a small recipe book and give these recipe books to the brand managers, showing them how people really use their product and how they use it in an innovative, different way that they might not have thought of, giving them the ability to actually see and experience what the consumer experiences. And then a final way to really make the marketeers, but everybody basically within the company, to have them think about your consumer, is we created this portal that is only accessible for people who work within Heinz, and here they can find back the results from the different phases during the research, and they can always go back. And this is basically bringing down those walls that I mentioned in the beginning, where people have a question about a consumer, they want to look this up. But there are so many different reports from so many different agencies. You don't exactly know when the report was done. This kind of solves this problem by bringing everything together in one portal, easy accessible, organized in terms of different categories, different brands, products. It's very easy to find, providing that immediate customer feedback if they have a question, or they can just look it up basically. So thinking at what are the results for Heinz, what did they get out of their ongoing community. And here we can identify 4 results. On the one hand, there is an increased awareness among marketeers, but also other departments within the company, of who the consumer is and who they really are. Not just the target group that was defined by marketing, but who the people are who really use your product on a day-to-day basis, the people who love your product, really getting to know them. Which brings me to the second part. It enables marketeers to really speak the consumer language, see what is relevant to them and what is actually not so relevant to them. It also creates an opportunity, on the one hand, to challenge management if they have questions or assumptions about the consumer, but also the other way around. Management can challenge you and ask you how well you know your consumer as a brand manager, as a marketeer, and to go to the community and really just ask people what they think and really have that immediate feedback. And finally, it allowed Heinz to start quite small, like Tom said, mainly with testing of campaigns, testing of almost finalized products, to now going actually using the whole funnel of business objective questions that there are, also using it for product ideation, for innovation ideas, shopper research. Basically all business objectives are now being covered with the help of the Heinz community. So as a wrap up, the main takeaways, it's an evolution, not a revolution. And I think that the Heinz community is the perfect example for that. I mean, they had it now for 5 years. It started quite small, and now it has really grown as a community, but also the role within Heinz itself has grown. Secondly, targeting the right information. So here we have to make sure that we have within Heinz a good structure of who asks questions when, making sure it's relevant to them and that we have the right target audience. And finally, also making sure to get that right balance, making sure that we mix the stories with enough actionable insights to prove the added value of the community. And finally, of course, it's all about bringing the consumer to life, but it requires some determination to keep it alive as well, some dedication as well. And that was it from my part, and I think now we have some time for Q&A.
Yeah, that's true, Sébastien. So who has a question? I see already first question coming in. From Caroline, who should be responsible for which new questions will be added to the community? Well, I think that's a joint responsibility of somebody at the agency side, so being Insights Consulting, and somebody at the client side. At our side, we have the moderator. At the client side, there is what we call a community gatekeeper or ambassador. Gatekeeper, why do we call it the gatekeeper? Because he or she is making sure there are new questions, but on the other hand is also so going to all the different people, all the different departments in the business, but on the other hand is also making choices. Which question are we going to put on the community today? Which one will be there tomorrow? Because and it's a joint responsibility then of the gatekeeper and the moderator. It's the gatekeeper who collects the questions. It's the moderator who will ask them on the community and in the right way. And together they decide on priorities, but also on the mixture, because you need to make sure that it stays fun for participants as well. So we have like between 5 and 7 questions, depending on the intensity of the community every week. And of course, we try to make sure that it's not very repetitive, that it's more like fun and entertaining for the participants as well. So it's on the one hand about collecting the questions, prioritizing them, and also having the community members in mind, so that it keeps on being fun for them. That's why we call that internal person a gatekeeper. We call the internal person also an ambassador, because he or she needs to make sure all the people in the business are aware of the community, use it, and keep on using it. So it's a joint responsibility in all projects of somebody at our site and somebody at the client side. I hope, Caroline, that is answering your question. Are there other questions? Another question is, have you used this methodology for clients that would like to grow beyond their existing consumer base? Yes, indeed. What we do, for example, for IKEA is we work with existing customers, lapsed customers, so customers who were once a client but aren't anymore today, and with new and potential customers. Especially in new markets where we work for them, like in China, that's very important. So that's possible. There are 2 angles. There are 2 entry points in a community. You can or use the brand or use the topic. The brand is then it's a branded community, like in the case of Ben & Jerry's, and we work with brand fans, or it's a topic and we work with people who have affinity with the topic. In the case of IKEA, it could be interior decoration. In the case of Heinz, it's a community sponsored by Heinz, and the brand name is very little on the platform, but actually it's a community about food, and not necessarily they're all people who buy every single day all the products of Heinz. So yes, it's definitely possible, and it's also possible for other categories outside of FMCG products. We do this as well for banks, insurance companies, all kinds of services companies, and we also do this for companies who produce durables, and even within the pharmaceutical sector, we apply this methodology among patients and doctors. Other questions? How do you keep the community alive? One from Annelies. Well, that's about making sure it is always interesting for all the people that are on the community. It's by having a lot of variation in what you do with them, in how you ask questions. It's about gamifying what you do in the community. It's about giving enough feedback, giving them a present from time to time, and it's that mixture of all those things that makes that in the long run people will be still engaged and will be willing to still work with you. That being said, every quarter we need to refresh 25% of the community if we have an ongoing community. So it's about doing all we can, but it's quite logic that after a couple of months people say, well, it was fun, but now it's time for something else. So 25% of the community is refreshed also. I hope this answers your question. I see another question coming. What kind of research do you typically follow up with, given the community is not too representative, as you said? Well, it's as representative, let's say, as a qualitative focus group. It's qualitative research. We work with people who want to work with us, who want to share things and opinions with us. And that is already, I think, very large part of the answer. Everything that you would normally do with qualitative research or with ethnographic research, everything that is more in the sense of discussions and observations, that's what we do with a community. So it's most of the times in the fuzzy front end of product development, it's about insight generation, or it's about using qualitative research to look for improvements of existing things, to pre-test things. So everything that you use qual for, that you use observational techniques for, that's what we perform in a community. But it's definitely not a substitute for quantitative research. I see another question coming in. If there are other people who have questions, feel free to ask them now, or of course feel free to drop an email towards myself or to us, Sébastien. Our email addresses are pretty simple, sebastien@insightsconsulting.com or tom@insightsconsulting.com. So we are waiting for the last question. Is it relevant to organize a community for different brands of one company? I think that is. Sébastien, can you tell a little bit more? Because that's exactly the case in the Heinz community, no? We work with more than one brand here.
Exactly. So, indeed, like you said, Tom, for the Heinz community, we have actually a lot of different brands. There are obviously
I think all 8 different brands, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
I should double check, but I think it was indeed 8. They're all obviously food brands, so they need to have something in common, so that we can also recruit participants who have this in common as well, the interest in food. But it's definitely possible for brands. We have done the same, for example, for coffee, where we work together with a coffee producer, a global coffee producer who also has different brands. The interesting aspect there was that whereas the Heinz brands are mostly all in the same price category. For the coffee brands, this was not completely the case, but it definitely works as well, because they're the unifying factor of coffee loving was enough to bring these people together, to get the conversation going, and to have them talk about different brands is actually something they like because it brings that variation that keeps the community extra interesting. So definitely a possibility for different brands.
In the meanwhile, I see a question coming from Peter. So let's wait a second. By the way, if you want to know more about the things we shared in this presentation about co-researchers, gamification, communities in general, case studies, you can find them on our website, www.insightsconsulting.com. And within a month, we will have a new publication, a book on consumer consulting boards coming. So more information also in that one. In the meanwhile, Peter has his question ready. What are some frequently used techniques to find these interesting customers or consumers, for instance, for companies who have not much online presence? Yeah, good question. We find those consumers on brand fan pages, like in the case of Ben & Jerry's. Of course, we use the brand fan page to find those consumers who are extreme brand fans. Other possibilities are databases. For example, in the banking sector, we use a lot the databases that those banks have of prospects and of course clients. It can also be offline recruitment. We once did a project in the UK for a brand of hair care products, and we were looking for fashionistas. We literally went on the streets of London to scout those fashionistas, because that's typically something, if you ask it in a questionnaire, more people will state that they are a fashionista than they really are. And secondly, probably you don't find fashionistas in the average online access panel, but still for some topics, of course, online access panels can also be a great way to find participants. I always say it's not where you find them, but it's how you screen them that is the most important thing. And when it comes to screening them, we have statement batteries that check if the people are really interested and interesting, if they have minimal level of internet literacy, if they are willing to share their opinion and their lives in an online environment. So that's a couple of things that we do. So screening is more important than, let's say, where you find them. The screening is really crucial. I don't know if there are other questions. I don't see any coming anymore, but let's say that we are at your service the rest of today and also in the coming days and weeks. If you have questions, drop us an email, give us a call, and of course we are looking forward to meet you at one of our next webinars or at one of our upcoming offline events in one of our offices. So both for me and for Sébastien, thanks for being here. Have a nice evening. Bye bye.
Have a nice afternoon. Bye.